My mom laughed at me in front of everyone, calling my job a joke like I was nothing. I sat there, quiet, while my family watched, thinking maybe she was right. Weeks later, she walked into a crowded event, still believing I had failed. Then she saw me on stage. Not watching, leading. Not invisible, applauded. Her face froze. That laugh? Gone. So tell me, would you forgive her or walk away forever? The laughter didn't stop when I looked up. It got louder. My mom leaned back in her chair, shaking her head like I had just told the dumbest joke at the table. Wait, that's your job, she said, smiling at everyone else, not at me. Forks paused midair. My brother smirked. Someone let out a quiet chuckle. I felt the heat rise to my face, but I kept my voice steady. Yes, that's my job. She waved her hand dismissively. Sitting on a laptop all day? That's not a career, Emily. Silence followed, but it wasn't the kind that protects you. It was the kind that agrees. I stared down at my plate, hearing every tiny sound, the clink of a glass, the scrape of a fork, while her words echoed louder than all of it. Why does it hurt more when it comes from family? Why does it stay? I could have argued. I could have listed everything I've done, everything I've built from nothing. Instead, I took a breath and let it pass. Not because she was right, but because she didn't have all the information. I lifted my eyes, just for a second, and met hers. It's okay, I said quietly. She smiled like she'd won. But she didn't know who I was working for. That night didn't come out of nowhere. It had been building for years, quietly, consistently, until it finally spilled over that dinner table. I'm Emily Carter. I'm 27, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one who didn't make it. Not officially. Not in any document. Just in the way people looked at me. I dropped out of college halfway through my second year. Not because I didn't care, but because I was drowning. Tuition kept rising, my grades slipped, and every call home turned into another reminder that I was falling behind. You just need to try harder, my mom would say. I did. It still wasn't enough. So I left. After that, things got messy. I moved into a tiny studio apartment that barely fit a bed and a desk. The walls were thin. The heater barely worked. Most nights, the only light came from my laptop screen. I took whatever jobs I could find, serving coffee, answering emails, writing small pieces online that paid almost nothing. You're still doing those internet things? My brother once asked, half laughing. Yeah, I said. I am. Because I didn't have a backup plan. This was it. And slowly, so slowly it almost didn't feel real, I started getting better. Writing faster. Thinking sharper. Understanding what people actually wanted to watch, to read, to feel. But none of that showed on the outside. To my family, I was still the girl who quit. The one who never finished anything. And when people see you that way long enough, you start to wonder, are they right? Maybe that's why every visit home felt like walking into a comparison I never signed up for. It didn't need to be said out loud at first. You could see it in the way my mom lit up when Jason talked. The way she leaned in, asking questions, smiling like everything he said mattered more. Jason just closed another deal, she'd say, almost casually, but loud enough for me to hear. That's amazing, someone would reply. It's nothing, he'd shrug, but he never corrected her pride. Then her eyes would shift to me. A pause. A different tone. And you, Emily? Still. Figuring things out. Still. That word stayed longer than anything else. I'd nod, forcing a small smile. Yeah. Still working. But it was never enough. Not the hours. Not the effort. Not the quiet progress no one saw. Because Jason had something visible, something she could explain to others. I didn't. At one point, I tried. I told her about a project I was proud of, about a piece I wrote that was gaining traction online. She listened for a few seconds, then cut in gently, almost kindly. That's nice, sweetheart, but have you thought about something more stable? Stable. Respectable. Real. Words that somehow never applied to me. The room would move on. Conversations shifted. Laughter returned, but not for me. I sat there, present but not included, wondering how far you have to fall in someone's eyes before they stop seeing you at all. Is it fair? Is it normal? Or is there a line families shouldn't cross? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But I remember the moment everything changed. It wasn't a long speech. It wasn't even loud. Just one sentence. And somehow, it broke everything. That sentence didn't just appear out of nowhere. It came from everything they thought my work represented. What I actually did every day looked unimpressive from the outside. I sat in a small room, laptop open, switching between documents, analytics dashboards, and endless drafts. No uniform. No office badge. No real title that sounded impressive at family dinners. I write content, I had said once, trying to explain. My mom frowned. Content? Like posts? Scripts, strategy, audience growth. She cut me off with a small laugh. So, social media. And just like that, everything I spent hours building was reduced to something trivial. But what she never saw were the details. The late nights spent rewriting a single paragraph until it hit the right emotion. The way I studied audience behavior, what made people stop scrolling, what made them stay, what made them feel something. Some nights, I'd refresh the dashboard again and again. 1,200 views, then 3,000, then 7,500. Small numbers to most people. But to me, they meant someone was listening. Why don't you just get a stable job? Jason asked one evening. I didn't answer right away. Because how do you explain something people have already decided doesn't matter? Instead, I kept working. Quietly improving. Quietly learning. Maybe they were right to doubt me. Or maybe they just didn't understand the world I was stepping into. Because the truth is those small numbers weren't staying small for long. And then came the night that proved just how small they thought my world really was. It started like any other family dinner, plates passing, small talk, Jason casually mentioning a new deal at work. My mom lit up instantly. That's my son, she said proudly, placing her hand on his arm. I watched quiet, already knowing what was coming next. Her gaze shifted to me. And you, Emily? She asked, almost as an afterthought. Still doing whatever that is? I set my fork down carefully. I'm working full-time now, I said. Content strategy. She blinked, then laughed. Not a polite laugh. A real one, loud, sharp, impossible to ignore. Content strategy, she repeated, turning to the others. Do you hear this? My brother smirked. Someone at the table chuckled under their breath. The room tilted, not physically, but enough for me to feel it. I'm serious, I said, keeping my voice steady. She shook her head, still smiling. Emily, honey, you sit at home and type on a laptop. That's not a career. A few seconds passed. No one defended me. No one corrected her. The sound of her laughter replayed in my head, slower this time, heavier. I could feel every pair of eyes on me waiting. Say something. Stand up for yourself. But I didn't. Instead, I asked quietly, what would you consider a real job? She didn't hesitate. Something people respect. That landed harder than anything else she'd said. I leaned back slightly, nodding once, as if I understood. Maybe part of me did. Or maybe I was just done explaining myself to people who had already decided who I was. So I picked up my glass, took a slow sip, and let the moment pass. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. But right there, in that silence, I made a decision. I could have ended it right there. One sentence. One truth. That was all it would have taken to wipe that smile off her face. But I didn't. Instead, I let the moment settle, like dust after something breaks. I nodded once more, quietly, as if I accepted everything she had just said. "You're right," I murmured, not loud enough to start another reaction, just enough to close the conversation. Her shoulders relaxed. The table moved on. Plates shifted, voices returned, laughter redirected somewhere else. Just like that, I disappeared again. But something had changed. On the drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. I let the silence sit with me. Every word replayed, every laugh stretched out longer than it had lasted. For a second, I wondered, should I have said something? Should I have defended myself? Or was this better? When I got back to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. The room stayed dark, lit only by the faint glow of my laptop screen as it woke up. I stared at it for a moment, then sat down slowly. No more explaining. No more trying to be understood. If they needed proof, I would give them proof. Not with words. With something they couldn't laugh at. What they didn't see was how far that joke had already gone. The company I worked for wasn't some random online page. It was a fast-growing media startup, the kind people in the industry whispered about before it suddenly became impossible to ignore. Millions of views every month. Content that spread faster than anyone expected. And behind it all, Daniel Hayes. If you were in digital media, you knew that name. His team doesn't hire just anyone. A colleague once told me during a late-night call. If you're in, it means something. At first, I didn't believe that applied to me. I had started as a quiet assistant, organizing files, drafting ideas, staying invisible. But things shifted. One meeting turned into two. Small suggestions turned into full concepts. And then one day, Daniel looked at me across the table and said, "That angle. Keep pushing it." It was the first time someone at that level didn't just hear me, he saw me. From there, the work changed. I wasn't just helping anymore. I was shaping stories. Building narratives that reached people I would never meet. Watching numbers climb not randomly, but because of decisions I made. Late at night, I'd sit alone, staring at the analytics dashboard as the views ticked upward, steady and real. Not luck. Not noise. Growth. If my family saw this, if they understood who I worked with, what I was actually doing, would they finally take me seriously? Maybe. Or maybe they'd just find another reason not to. Either way, I wasn't ready to show them yet. So instead of proving anything to them, I focused on getting better. It started quietly. In meetings, I spoke a little more. Not to impress, just to test if my ideas could stand on their own. Most of the time, no one reacted. Sometimes someone would nod. And once in a while, Daniel would pause, lean forward slightly, and say that again. Those moments mattered. I began preparing more before each call, studying past content, predicting audience reactions, building angles instead of just suggestions. One idea turned into a discussion. A discussion turned into a direction. And slowly, I stopped feeling like the smallest voice in the room. "Who came up with this hook?" someone asked during a team review. I hesitated for a second. I did. A brief silence. Then Daniel nodded. "Good. It works." That was it. No applause. No big reaction. but it stayed with me longer than any compliment I'd ever heard. The numbers followed. Not overnight, but steadily. One video performed better than expected. Another held attention longer than usual. I watched the analytics climb, line by line, knowing exactly which choice had led to which result. Late nights became normal again, but they felt different now. Not like survival, like momentum. In meetings, my name came up more often. Not as the assistant. As the one behind specific ideas. I didn't announce it. I didn't call home and explain. Because this time, I wasn't trying to be believed. The shift didn't happen all at once, but when it did, it was impossible to ignore. It started with a project I almost didn't speak up on. The concept felt risky, a little different from what the team usually approved. I hesitated, then said it anyway. What if we change the perspective, make the audience feel like they're part of the story? A pause. A few looks exchanged. Daniel leaned back, thinking. Walk me through it. So I did. Step by step. Angle, pacing, emotional beats. By the time I finished, the room felt different. Not convinced, but curious. Let's test it, he said. That was all I needed. The video went live 3 days later. I didn't expect much at first. Just another upload. Another attempt. But within hours, something felt off in a good way. The numbers moved faster. Comments came in earlier. People weren't just watching, they were reacting. I refreshed the dashboard. 200,000 views. Then 800,000. Then 2 million before the day even ended. Emily, are you seeing this? Someone messaged. I was. I couldn't look away. By the end of the week, it crossed 20 million. 20 million. I stared at the screen, letting it sink in. Not luck. Not coincidence. Something I helped build reached that many people. For a moment, I just sat there, silent. No celebration. No call to anyone. Just a quiet realization settling in. Do you need someone else to recognize you for it to count? Because no one at home knew. And somehow, that mattered more than I expected. That moment didn't fade, it opened a door. After the 20 million views, things shifted in ways I couldn't ignore. Not dramatically, not overnight, but in the small details that quietly redefine your place. In meetings, people paused a little longer when I spoke. Ideas weren't just heard, they were considered. 2 days later, I got a message. Can you come in early tomorrow? No explanation. Just that. I showed up before the rest of the team. The office was quieter than usual, lights half on, screens still dark. Daniel was already there. He didn't waste time. Sit, he said. I did. He slid a document across the table. You've been doing more than your role for a while now. I glanced down. My name was there, followed by a title I hadn't expected. Content strategist. For a second, I didn't react. I just read it again, making sure I wasn't filling in something that wasn't real. This isn't just about one video, he continued. It's consistency. You see patterns others miss. I looked up. Are you sure? He gave a small nod. I wouldn't put it on paper if I wasn't. A quiet handshake followed. No big announcement. No applause. But it felt solid. Earned. Later that day, the official email went out. My inbox filled with short messages, well-deserved. Congrats. I read them all. Slowly. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel it. Not loud. Not overwhelming. Just steady pride. I thought about telling them. More than once. The promotion email sat open on my screen that night, the title still unfamiliar in the best way. I imagined forwarding it. Just one click. Let them read it for themselves. No explanation needed. No awkward conversation. Just proof. My phone buzzed. A message from my mom. Dinner this Sunday. Don't be late. I stared at it for a second. No question about how I was doing. No curiosity. Just routine. I typed, "I'll be there," then stopped. Deleted it. Rewrote it. Sent it. And that was it. I didn't mention the promotion. Not the title. Not the projects. Nothing. Because suddenly, it didn't feel like something I needed to say out loud. For so long, I had tried to explain myself, to make them understand, to make it sound real enough to earn their approval. But every time, it turned into doubt, or worse, dismissal. So I asked myself something different this time. Do I prove it with words, or let the results speak when they're impossible to ignore? The answer came easier than I expected. I closed my laptop, the screen fading to black, my reflection staring back at me for a brief second. No more updates. No more justifying. If they wanted to know, they'd find out. And then came the project that would change everything, whether I planned it or not. It started as another internal meeting. Slides, timelines, production plans. But this time, the scale was different. A live talk show. Industry guests. Press coverage. A room full of people who actually mattered in this space. "We need someone to present the content direction," one of the producers said. A few names were mentioned. Mine wasn't one of them. Not at first. Then Daniel spoke. Emily should do it. The room shifted slightly. Not resistance, just surprise. "Are you sure?" someone asked. He didn't hesitate. She built most of it. No one argued after that. From that moment on, everything moved faster. Rehearsals filled my schedule. Slides were rewritten, then rewritten again. Every line had to land. Every transition had to feel natural. I stood in front of empty chairs, practicing until the words stopped sounding like memorization and started feeling like mine. "Slow down here," Daniel said during one run-through. "Let them feel it." I nodded, adjusting, refining. At night, I'd go over it again in my apartment, laptop open, notes scattered. This wasn't just another project. It was exposure. Visibility. The kind you can't take back once it happens. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if I messed up? What if I froze? Then I remembered every late night, every ignored idea that eventually worked, every number that proved I knew what I was doing. By the time the event day arrived, I wasn't ready to impress anyone. I was ready to deliver. What I didn't plan for was who would be sitting in that audience. I didn't realize it at first. Backstage was controlled chaos, people moving fast, voices overlapping, last-minute adjustments everywhere. Someone handed me a mic. "You're on in 10. Another voice called out, "Check the slides again." I nodded, focused, keeping everything tight in my head. Then I stepped slightly toward the curtain and glanced out. Rows of seats filling up. Low conversations. Phones lighting up in the dim room. Nothing unusual until my eyes stopped. Second row. Slightly to the left. My mom. For a second, my brain didn't process it. She was dressed the same way she always was for events she considered important. Sitting straight. Looking around with quiet curiosity. Completely unaware. Next to her, Jason. Leaning back, scrolling through his phone, not paying much attention. I froze. Just for a moment. Why were they here? Then it clicked. Jason's company. One of the partners. Of course. They weren't here for me. Not even close. "Emily," someone whispered behind me. "You okay?" I didn't answer right away. My eyes were still locked on them. Watching. Taking it in. They had no idea. No idea that in a few minutes, the person they had dismissed so easily would be standing right in front of them. Not at the table. Not in the background. On stage. My grip tightened slightly around the mic. My heartbeat picked up, not panic, not fear, something sharper. What happens when the truth shows up and there's nowhere left to look away? My name was called before I had time to think twice. Please welcome Emily Carter. For a split second, everything went quiet in my head. Then the lights shifted, the curtain moved, and I stepped forward. The spotlight hit instantly, bright, unforgiving. I walked to the center of the stage, each step measured, steady. The audience blurred into a sea of faces, except for one. Second row. Left side. My mom. At first, she didn't react. Why would she? To her, Emily Carter was just a name. Just another speaker. I adjusted the mic, took a breath. Hi everyone, I began, my voice calm, controlled. I'm Emily, and I lead content strategy for this team. A pause. Not long. Just enough. Her head lifted slightly. Recognition didn't come all at once. It crept in slow, almost reluctant. Her eyes narrowed, focusing, trying to connect what she was seeing with what she thought she knew. I continued, moving through the opening lines we had rehearsed. The slides behind me shifted, campaign data, audience growth, numbers that filled the screen. Over the past year, we've scaled from thousands to millions of viewers. A murmur moved through the room. I didn't look down again. I didn't need to. I could feel it. The shift. The realization landing piece by piece. By the time I reached the core of the presentation, there was no confusion left. Her posture had changed. Completely still now. No smile. No casual interest. Just watching. Listening. Jason had put his phone down. For the first time in a long time, they were paying attention. Not because I explained. Not because I argued. Because they were seeing it. Right there. Unavoidable. And in that moment, one question cut through everything. What do you do when the person you once dismissed becomes the one everyone else is listening to? I didn't need to hear her to know what was happening. From the stage, under the lights, I could see it unfold in real time. The shock didn't hit her all at once. It spread across her face slowly, like something sinking in that she couldn't stop. Her eyes stayed fixed on me, unblinking, as if looking away would somehow undo what she was seeing. The woman who had laughed at me was now completely silent. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. The confidence she carried at the dinner table, the certainty in her judgments, was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar. Doubt. I moved through the next part of the presentation, my voice steady, my pacing controlled. But in between each line, I caught glimpses of her. Still sitting there. Still watching. No smile. No reaction. Just processing. Jason shifted beside her, finally paying attention. He leaned forward a little, his expression tighter now, less casual than before. Even from a distance, I could tell he was starting to understand too. And yet, neither of them moved. No whisper. No exchange. No attempt to explain what they were seeing. Because how do you explain something you never believed could exist? The room around them stayed engaged, people nodding, taking notes, reacting exactly the way they were supposed to. But for my mom, everything had narrowed down to one thing. Me. Standing there. Speaking. Leading. And for the first time, she had no control over the narrative. But even that moment wasn't the end of it. And just when it seemed like the moment had already said enough, it deepened. I was wrapping up the final section of my presentation when I heard movement behind me. A familiar step. Measured. Confident. Daniel walked onto the stage. The room responded instantly, applause rising, louder than before. Not polite. Real. Earned. I stepped slightly to the side, giving him space, but he didn't take over right away. Instead, he stood next to me, letting the applause settle, his presence alone shifting the weight of the moment. Then he spoke. "Before we move on," he said, glancing toward the audience, "I want to point something out." A pause. Just enough to pull every eye forward. He turned slightly toward me. "Everything you just saw didn't come from a team effort alone." The room went quiet again. "This," he continued, "is largely her work. No build-up. No exaggeration. Just a direct statement." I didn't move. I didn't look down. I didn't need to. I could feel it, the shift landing, spreading across the room, reaching further than anything I had said myself. "She understands audience behavior better than most people I've worked with," he added. "And she's been doing it quietly." A few nods in the crowd. Then more. And then applause again. Louder this time. Sustained. Not for the company. For me. I glanced forward, just briefly. My mom hadn't moved. Still sitting there, still watching, but now there was something else in her expression. Not confusion anymore. Not disbelief. Recognition. Not because I explained it. Because someone else confirmed it. The applause didn't fade quickly, it stayed, growing fuller, louder, filling every corner of the room. For a moment, I just stood there, letting it happen. Not reacting too fast. Not breaking the moment. Because this wasn't something you rush past. This was something you feel. People in the audience were nodding, some exchanging looks, others clapping with a kind of certainty, as if what they had just seen made complete sense. No hesitation. No doubt. Just recognition. "Impressive," I heard someone say from the front row. Another voice followed, "You can tell she built this." I didn't turn toward them. I didn't need to. Their words reached me anyway, clearer than anything I had ever heard at that dinner table. For so long, I had chased approval in the wrong places. Tried to explain my worth to people who had already decided I didn't have any. And now, a room full of strangers saw it instantly. No history with me. No expectations. No assumptions. Just the work. I glanced forward again, just briefly. My mom was still there. Watching. Not clapping. Not looking away either. Just still. And that raised a question I hadn't fully faced before. When people who don't know you can recognize your value, does it matter more than the ones who were supposed to believe in you first? The applause eventually softened, fading into conversations, footsteps, shifting chairs. People began to stand, to move, to reconnect with each other. But I stayed where I was for a second longer, letting the noise settle into something distant. Then I stepped off the stage. Backstage again, but it didn't feel the same. Someone patted my shoulder. That was strong. Another voice, "You own that room." I nodded, polite, present, but not fully there. Because I already knew what was coming next. I didn't have to look for her. I felt it. A pause in the movement around me. A hesitation. Then footsteps, slower than the others. Emily, her voice. I turned. My mom stood a few steps away. Closer than she had been in a long time, yet somehow unfamiliar. She wasn't standing tall the way she used to at family dinners. Her posture was different. Careful. Almost unsure. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Up close, I could see it clearly now. The shift. The absence of something I had grown used to. No judgment in her eyes. No quick smile. No dismissive glance. Just silence. Jason lingered behind her, quieter than I had ever seen him. Watching, but not interrupting. "I didn't know," she said finally, her voice lower than usual. I held her gaze steady. "I know." Another pause. Heavier this time. Everything we hadn't said over the years sat between us, unspoken but impossible to ignore. And in that moment, something became undeniable for the first time. She wasn't smiling. That silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, heavy with everything that had never been said. She looked at me like she was trying to piece something together, like the version of me she had held onto for years no longer fit what she had just witnessed. Her eyes searched my face, not with judgment this time, but with uncertainty. I let it stretch. Didn't rush to fill it. Didn't soften it either. Because for once, I wasn't the one trying to explain. She took a small breath. "Emily, I didn't let her finish. Not out of anger. Not even to interrupt. Just to be clear." I held her gaze, steady, unshaken. "Do you understand now?" My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The words landed between us, simple but impossible to ignore. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just direct. Her expression shifted again, subtle but real. The kind of reaction you can't rehearse. She opened her mouth slightly, then closed it. Looked down for a second, then back up. Jason shifted behind her, but still didn't speak. No one stepped in. No one tried to ease the moment. Because there was nothing to fix. Only something to face. For so long, the balance had been clear. She spoke. I listened. She judged. I explained. Now, it was different. Now she was the one searching for words. And I was the one waiting. She didn't answer right away. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt different, less sharp, more fragile. Like something inside her was shifting, trying to find its place. "I didn't understand," she said finally, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. Not defensive. Not firm. Just uncertain. I watched her closely. No interruption. No reaction yet. Her hands moved slightly, almost restless. I thought. She stopped, exhaled, then tried again. "I thought you were just wasting time." There it was. Not dressed up. Not softened. The truth exactly as it had always been. And for a second, something inside me tightened. All those nights. All those moments at the table. Every look, every laugh, it came back, not as noise, but as something sharper. She looked up at me again. I was wrong. Simple words. Heavy ones. I shouldn't have said those things. I shouldn't have. She hesitated, searching for the right ending, then gave up on finding one. "I'm sorry, Emily." The air between us shifted. Not lighter. Just different. I didn't respond immediately. I let it sit there exactly as she said it. Because this wasn't just about one apology. It was about years of being dismissed, reduced, overlooked. A single sorry couldn't erase that. But it did something else. It opened a door that had been closed for a long time. And standing there, looking at her, really looking this time, I found myself asking something I hadn't expected to feel so strongly. Is an apology enough when the damage has already shaped who you became? For a moment, I thought I would feel something bigger. Relief. Satisfaction. Maybe even a sense of victory after everything that had led to this point. But standing there, looking at her, none of that came. Instead, it was quieter. More complicated. I had imagined this moment before, different versions of it. In some, I proved her wrong and walked away without looking back. In others, She apologized, and everything somehow made sense again. Reality didn't follow either script. Her apology was real. I could hear it in her voice, see it in the way she avoided my eyes for a second too long. But the past didn't disappear just because she acknowledged it. It was still there, woven into every version of me that had learned to stay quiet, to push forward without support. I crossed my arms lightly, not defensive, just grounding myself. "I hear you," I said, calm, measured. Not cold. Not warm. Just honest. Because I did hear her. But hearing wasn't the same as healing. A part of me wanted to let it go right there. To accept the apology, close the chapter, make it easier for both of us. Another part hesitated. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip the moment someone says sorry. It's a process. And sometimes, letting go doesn't mean going back. I looked at her again, this time without the weight of needing her approval. So the question stayed, not for her, but for me. Do I forgive? Or do I finally move on? For a second, I tried to hold it in. I really did. But something about standing there, after everything, after all those years of swallowing it down, made that impossible. I let out a breath, sharper than I expected. Then I looked at her, not as a daughter waiting for approval, but as someone who had been carrying too much for too long. "You laughed at me," I said. Not loud, but it cut through everything. Her eyes flickered. She didn't interrupt. At that table, in front of everyone, I continued, my voice tightening just slightly. Like I was a joke. Like everything I was trying to build meant nothing. I took a step closer. Not aggressive, just grounded. "Do you know what that does to someone?" She shook her head, almost instinctively, like she already knew the answer wasn't something she wanted to hear. "I stopped telling you things," I said. Not because I didn't have anything to share, but because every time I tried, it got turned into something small. Something easy to dismiss. My throat tightened, but I didn't stop. I worked nights. I figured things out on my own. I failed, fixed it, failed again, and you never saw any of it. You didn't want to. A pause. Just long enough to breathe. And the worst part? I added, quieter now. I started believing you. That landed heavier than anything else. I questioned myself. I thought maybe you were right. That I wasn't enough. That this wasn't real. My voice steadied again, not softer, but clearer. But I kept going anyway. Another step back this time. Space between us again. "I didn't need you to understand everything," I said. "I just needed you, not to tear it down." Silence. Raw. Unfiltered. And for the first time, everything I had held back was finally out. For a moment, nothing moved. My words stayed in the air between us, raw, exposed, impossible to take back. I could hear my own breathing, steady but heavy, like something had finally been released after years of holding it in. And then, she nodded. Slowly. Not out of habit. Not to end the conversation. But because she understood. "I see it now," she said, her voice quieter, stripped of everything it used to carry. "I see you. No excuses. No justifications. Just that." Something inside me shifted. Not dramatically. Not like a sudden wave of emotion. It was subtler than that, like a weight being lifted, piece by piece. For so long, I had imagined this moment as something louder. A clear victory. A final line that proved everything. But this was different. Because it wasn't about winning. It was about being undeniable. Behind us, the room was still alive, people talking, moving, a few glances in our direction. Some recognized me from the stage. Some didn't. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she finally saw what everyone else had already seen. No more doubt. No more dismissal. Just recognition. And in that quiet space, one thought settled in clearer than anything before it. Maybe justice doesn't arrive the way you expect. Not with noise. Not with revenge. But in the moment when the truth stands in front of someone, and they can't deny it anymore. For the first time, she had nothing to add. No advice. No correction. No quiet comment to reshape the situation back into something she could control. She just stood there. Still. The same woman who used to fill every silence at the dinner table, guiding conversations, deciding what mattered and what didn't, now seemed unsure of where to place even a single word. Her posture said everything. Shoulders slightly lowered. Hands no longer steady. Her gaze shifted, not avoiding me completely, but no longer holding the same certainty it once did. Jason glanced at her, as if waiting for her to say something, anything. But she didn't. Because there was nothing left to explain away. No angle to reframe. No quick judgment to fall back on. The roles had changed without announcement. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just undeniably. A few people passed behind us, voices low, conversations continuing as if this moment didn't exist. But for her, it did. Completely. She wasn't the center anymore. Not in this space. Not in this story. And she knew it. I didn't need to point it out. I didn't need to say another word. Because sometimes, the loudest shift happens in silence. And somehow, that silence said more than anything I could have added. I didn't stay much longer after that. There was no dramatic exit, no final line I needed to deliver. I simply stepped back, gave them space, and walked away calm, steady, without looking over my shoulder. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because something inside me had finally settled. For so long, I thought revenge would feel louder. I imagined it as a moment where everything flipped, where the people who doubted me would regret it instantly, where I would finally feel complete. But standing there after everything, I realized it wasn't about making anyone feel small. It was about no longer feeling small myself. All those nights, all those quiet decisions, all the times I kept going without being seen, they weren't building toward revenge. They were building something much deeper. Self-worth. And that doesn't come from winning an argument. It doesn't come from proving someone wrong in a single moment. It comes from knowing who you are, even when no one else sees it yet. I didn't need my mom's approval anymore. Not because I stopped caring, but because I had finally learned to stand without it. Maybe that's what real closure looks like. Not a perfect ending. Not a repaired past. Just a clear understanding that you've outgrown the version of yourself that once needed validation to move forward. And once you reach that point, there's nothing left to prove. And now, this is where it turns back to you. Because it's easy to watch a story like this and think you know what you'd do. It's easy to say, I'd forgive, or I'd walk away, when you're not the one sitting at that table, not the one hearing those words over and over again. But imagine it for a second. Really imagine it. The person who was supposed to believe in you didn't. The person who laughed when you were struggling is now standing in front of you, saying, I'm sorry. So, what do you do next? Do you accept it and try to rebuild something that was broken for years? Or do you step back, not out of anger, but because you've changed too much to go back to who you used to be? There isn't a perfect answer here. And that's what makes it harder. Some people will say forgiveness is strength. That letting go is the only way to truly move forward. Others will say distance is necessary. That not every relationship deserves a second chance, especially when the damage runs deep. So, I want to hear from you. No safe answers. No, it depends. Backhand index pointing right if you were in this situation. What would you choose? Type it clearly. Team forgive, if you believe in giving her another chance. Team walk away, if you think some lines, once crossed, can't be undone. And don't just pick a side, tell me why. Because sometimes, the real story doesn't end with the character. It continues with you.